had my tea, I'm feeling human now. About to go into the kitchen to show you what Chris has been getting on with. But before I go in, I'm going to show you time-lapse of what he's been doing over the last couple of days. And you'll see that we've made quite a major decision. So as soon as I've shown you the time-lapse, I'll explain why we've done that. Yes, we're not going to be using the original chimney, and this decision has taken a very long time to make. We eventually finally took a decision when I was in the south of France with my aunt, and that was this week's patron video. So all of you patrons out there, if you haven't seen it yet, it's on patreon.com/the Chateau Diaries. And we looked together at the plans, we thought about the pros and cons of keeping it, and we decided not to. Now, the reason for that is partly structural, partly historic. We have to decide in each room that we're doing which part of the history of the building we're keeping. This chimney is older than the cooker.
Yeah, about 30 years or so.
Yes, about 30 years apart.
25.
However, rather than keeping the chimney, we have decided to keep the cooker, and we can't really keep both together. The reason we can't keep both is that when they put this cooker in, they've put it running into the old chimney. So in fact, this arch would have stopped here at the end of the little bit that comes out. And the wall for it, critically, would have been there, where it just stops here. You see, they've cut the end wall. And instead, they put a new one here. So in order to use this, we would have to perhaps remove this bit, open the whole thing up to there, and remove this new supporting wall. That gives us two problems. Problem number one, we would have to rebuild this wall, but we can't because there's a cooker in the way. And problem number two, if we remove this, obviously we need to put a beam in. Well, that wouldn't be the end of the world if we were just putting a beam in here. But it turns out the beam would have to go across as well, because this new wall goes all the way to the top of the chimney. So they really did the job well. You've got to hand it to them. In the late 19th, early 20th century, when they put this oven in, they did the job beautifully. They redid the chimney. And that would be a huge job. We would need major structural reports, and it took us over a year to get the structural report for the Grand Salon.
Over 1 year?
Okay, over two. Yeah, over 2 years.
I wish.
Yeah. So the thought of having to wait for another structural report before we can put the kitchen in is slightly giving me palpitations, and the cost would be absolutely enormous. We would then end up with something that is a tiny little oven next to that oven, if we keep it, and set back, which is just going to cause a total lack of symmetry in the room that is also stressing me out quite a lot. We did ask advice from the kitchen company who are going to be fitting and designing the kitchen around our plan, and said to them, what is best? Is it best to have just the range going back into the old chimney, or best to have a straight line? And they said they have fitted both types of kitchen a lot in historic homes using this because it's very fashionable to do that. And they said ergonomically it's always better to have a straight line in terms of the ease of cooking, because if you imagine the cooker filling this and Marie's got a huge heavy pot that she's trying to pick up, she's going to hit a wall either side to put it down, and it's nice if she can just pick it up here and put it down there. That seems safer, easier. We also realised that if we do set an oven into it, even if we got rid of this one, for example, and then reopened all of this, did all the structural work and put a new range in it, would look really pretty. But we would still not be keeping these original bricks. We would actually be making it much higher. And even if we were able to keep them, we wouldn't be leaving them exposed, because you just can't wipe that surface in a kitchen that's used very often. It's not hygienic. It needs to be rebuilt because they're slipping. You can see that here. Some are broken. So the whole thing needs to be redone if it's going to be exposed. And I just don't think it's the sort of surface that we want to go for in the kitchen.
Also, they would have never been open anyway with bricks. It would have always been plastered.
It would have been plastered. Chris says he's found traces of the plaster. It was rendered before. So it's been a huge decision. We really knew that we had either a massive job of opening this chimney, getting rid of that and using it symmetrically. It was a major contender. We really considered it a lot. But I couldn't bring myself to get rid of the oven. And I think the majority of you are going to think that I have lost my marbles. But I think when you are restoring a historic home, there are many correct routes that you can go down. As long as you don't buy a historic home that has lots of historic features and rip them out willy-nilly, okay, that's not a correct route, but almost every other path you take is a reasonable one. And a lot of people take it back to the original architecture. In this case, that would be taking it back to the original 1860s chimney. However, my view is that it's more important to keep the most historically significant find in a room. And between the chimney and the cast iron stove, there's absolutely no competition. The most important one is the stove, which might seem very surprising to all of you, but it's not just any stove. Sound a little bit like the M&S adverts now. This is not just any stove. This is the Lalande stove. This is an Atelier Briffault. Atelier Briffault were the Rolls Royce of cast iron stoves. In fact, in his iconic kitchen at Giverny, Monet had the same stove, and all of the major chateaux and homes that were still lived in at the turn of the 20th century have stoves like this. They are increasingly rare, they're very important, and we do not want to lose this one. If you go to Georges Sand's house, which is only 20 minutes by car from here, which is where Georges Sand, who's like the Jane Austen of France, lived with her lover Chopin, you'll see that in her kitchen she has a beautiful stove like this one, and it's no wonder that when the Marquis, who lived here in the 60s, redid the kitchen completely, he saved the stove. In fact, they carried on cooking on it. And in fact, the hotel that I went to in Avignon, La Mirande, that I made a video on, in fact, I'll link to that here if you haven't seen it, that is the most beautiful restoration of a historic building that you can imagine. And they kept their stove. And if you go to La Mirande today, you can eat food still made on the stove. Now, we are not going to use that. I'm definitely not going to get Marie shoveling coal in every morning in order to cook. But people in future may well want to do that in this kitchen. And I don't want to make a decision today that is going to have a knock-on terrible effect on this chateau in 200 years' time. It won't be done on my watch. I think it's vandalism. I can't bring myself to do it, even though, trust me, I love the idea of just being able to put whatever kitchen I want in. But not only does this chateau have to work for me and for everyone living in it, when you buy a historic building, you also have to work for your building. Sometimes that means decisions that aren't your favourite decisions, but that are right for the building. It's a symbiotic relationship. Lalande is here to support me. I'm here to support Lalande. And one of the reasons I feel so strongly about keeping it is that I grew up in this beautiful hall, Cransford Hall, which was my parents' nursing home for people with Alzheimer's. We lived in the attic, and the kitchen was a spectacular fitted Edwardian kitchen with an Aga, and my parents kept the entire fitted pine kitchen. It was magnificent. And when we moved out and they sold to someone else who continued the nursing home, they ripped that kitchen out and put a stainless steel catering kitchen in, and it broke my parents' heart. Yes, it takes a little more work to look after these things, but it is so worth it. And we're only in these buildings for a short period of time. We have to look after them. And now, luckily for Cransford Hall, there is a new owner who's contacted my parents asking for photos that they have of it when they were there, because he is hoping to rebuild that Edwardian fitted kitchen now. And he wants to put back what there would have been there originally. And I don't want people to be thinking that in the future here at Lalande. However, I do think that, as my father said, when you have to work with constraints, it can make you even more creative, and it can end up creating something more beautiful than you would have done if you'd just been able to do whatever you want. So we will put a beautiful range cooker next to this one. Because we are not putting this back and we put the range cooker here, we will be able to have it in the middle of the room symmetrically. We will just have the hood over the range cooker. We will keep the Briffault, and I think they will look very, very good together. And magnificently, it is going to give us an entirely flat run behind the ovens for my father's tiles. All the beautiful tiles of the chateau, of the chapel, of the walled garden that he made of Lalande. And so I think that is going to become the main focal point of the room. And I think this is only going to add to the beauty of it. Practicality is nevertheless very important to us. We are not putting in the same oven that we had before. It's a little bit too small for our needs now. We will be putting in a bigger very beautiful range, and I'll be able to show you that next week, because next week we're going to the showroom to choose exactly what we want. So we will take all of you with us and we'll be able to reveal what the new range is. The kitchen now has to cater for about the same number of people that it always had to cater for in the past, which is dinners for maybe 20 people with everybody having the same meal. That would have been the same numbers as always. We're still fine with that. If in future we suddenly decide to do weddings for 150 people or become a restaurant, neither of which things we're thinking about at the moment, then we would put a catering kitchen into one of the outbuildings. So we have that opportunity, we have the space, that's something we can do. This kitchen remains the historic heart of the home. Now I want to take you up to the new Grand Salon and answer some of your questions about it, because whilst I haven't got time to respond to your comments, I do read them all. And I know a lot of you have been asking, where is the new Grand Salon? So I'm about to show you that. So I'm standing in the courtyard in absolutely delightful weather, as you can see and probably hear. There is the main gate in, over the moat, and then you can see the original wing of the chateau, at least the wing we believe to be the original wing. And here is the door which leads straight to our main staircase. I'm going to go in that way for me to show you where the Grand Salon is. As soon as you walk in through that door, you can either go straight up the main staircase, or you can turn right into what used to be our Grand Salon. It is now going to be our dining room, as you know, because we have turned the house upside down and we're going to be using the first floor, or for the Americans, the second floor, as our main floor, as they call it in Italy, the piano nobile. It's where the family would have lived in the past, and it's why the ceilings are so high up there and so low down here. Down here would have been for servants, for kitchens, for the areas that the family didn't need to go to. Important rooms are all upstairs. So we're putting the original layout back and we're going to go up the stairs for you to see the new Grand Salon, which is exactly the same as this room, but one floor up. So these stairs need quite a lot of work in the future, but one thing at a time, or as we like to do it in Lalande, 20 things at a time, and actually, others waiting.
And there's also a window hidden there behind the mirror.
You think there's one there?
Oh, I know there's one there.
Okay, then here we are in the new Grand Salon. And that's why we don't have a grand entrance hall, because this is such an old chateau that people would go into spiral staircases that lead from the courtyard directly to the first floor, to the second floor, if you're in the US. They didn't pass by downstairs at all. If you can see this half tower that we have here, the very ancient half tower that we have, you'll see there's a little door in the courtyard. If you go in there, you do not get to the ground floor. There is no way to the ground floor through that door. That tower would have been used only by the family, and it comes straight up to the first floor, straight to these apartments that they lived in. So that's why there's no grand entrance hall downstairs. Philip has a plan for one in future, but we're a long way from that.
We don't really know how old the chateau is because all the archives were lost, but the chateau is probably 14th, 15th or 16th century. We think 15th or earlier, because some of these pieces are very much like the tower that goes straight to the first floor, consistent with chateaus we've seen that were 14th century, for example. And the interesting thing is, as time passes, people's needs change and the buildings evolve with them. So we do think there was an original 17th or 18th century entrance hall. But more on that in future after we've done this, and downstairs, and the kitchen, and there's a few other projects.
In this room, we've had to make some decisions, and based on exactly the same premise as the decisions in the kitchen. Which period do we go back to? There are many choices that we can make. We lived in it as it had been put in the 19th century, with all of the little internal walls making the different bedrooms, and we could have kept that layout. Or we can go back to the date of the ceiling, 1620s, 1630s, as someone said in the comments. Let's say it's 1625, because then we can say it's 400 years old this year. So that's the date of the paintwork on the ceiling, but not of the ceiling itself, which probably dates from the same time as the doorway that we found, which we suspect is a good 100 years older than ceiling, maybe more actually. It could be 15th century, so 1400s. At the time that they painted the ceiling, they had already bricked the wall up. And we know that because this frieze that you see running here is almost certainly the same date as the painting of the ceiling. It's when they decorated the room in that way. And the frieze was running all the way along the front of the bricked up door. So they decorated the room after getting rid of the door. If we take the chateau back to this period, then we strip all the walls, we fill all the windows in again because it would have been much smaller windows.
Not that small, but smaller.
Yeah, but small like that. And we live with very little furniture and a lot of tapestries. So it's quite a difficult decision to know what to do. And many of you have asked if we've considered the fact that the panelling that we're going to be putting in here is 100 years younger than the painted ceiling, and another 100 years younger than that door, and probably slightly older than the panes of window, which are 19th century. So,
And then the balconies are probably 18th century again,
yes,
so it's...
I suspect so, 18th or maybe even early 19th. So we have a house here that has been lived in and changed critically by every generation who've lived in it from the 1400s probably until today. So how do we approach that? Do we do what we're doing in the kitchen, which is choose the most important part of the history? And for us, the most significant one here is the painted ceiling, because they are very rare and very precious. So we will certainly be showing it. But I don't want to make this room into a pastiche of the 17th century. I don't want to fake a 17th century room where everything else is new but looks 17th century, and we put the tiled floors in and we close the windows up a little bit, we change the window panes, and then we could furnish it with 17th century antiques. But to me, that's just creating a sort of Disney version of the 17th century in a real room that has been lived in for generations and has a beautiful vestige of the 17th century. So our view here is to live in the chateau in a very layered way, to embrace the fact that it's changed in each generation, and to do exactly what we're doing in the kitchen, where we preserve the history, we're keeping the cooker. There will, however, be a new, very workable range cooker next to it that is beautiful, and the whole room will be made to serve us today without destroying anything from the past. We're going to do exactly the same thing here. We're keeping the probably 15th century door. We are keeping the painted ceilings. We are going to use the 18th century panels, and we are keeping the 19th century window panes. And we're embracing the fact that this is a chateau that's changed in each generation. If it had been a chateau that had been built in a 5-year period in the mid-18th century, and then the family had fallen on hard times, not changed anything until the current day, I would keep that almost as a museum piece. That would be very precious, and I would put it all back to that mid-18th century. That's not what we've got here, and we can embrace what we have. And in fact, when you find a chateau that is a perfect example of one period, it is almost always because the family ran out of money after that heyday.
So, like Steph was saying, if a family had a chateau and it was built at a certain time, it means that the next generation would have wanted to modernize and put that twist on it, and maybe they would have hated Aunt Gertrude's curtains and the paneling that the mother-in-law put in because it was dreadful and it was so 1830s. You know what I mean? So what we want to create is a feeling that every single generation has changed a little bit, but in this case have kept some of the original pieces. So for here, the idea is that in the 17th century, the ceiling was painted, and then the family from the 18th century decided to add this beautiful paneling, probably add the mantelpiece, change the mantelpiece, put in beautiful parquet de Versailles, and make a new shell of the room. And then in the 19th century, they changed the windows for a more fashionable style with bigger panes, because before then, these would have been cut down the middle with a central bar, and these panes would have been rectangular, about that size. We still got one window, which is in your study, that still has those tiny little rectangular panes. But that's the idea. The ceiling was done in the 17th century, the door in the 15th century, the paneling in the 18th century, the windows in the 19th century, and then some of the furnishings, like electricity, that's not a furnishing, but you know what I mean, like lamps and stuff.
And some of the art, some of my father's art.
That's it, exactly. Every single generation is added and preserved. We are also opening up this window, because this window on the outside, you can see...
Oh yes, a lot of people have asked about that, Philip.
On this facade, if you stand outside, you can see that all the windows are big, except for this one. And this has got an outline of the much bigger window
yes.
that has been filled in to create this. Because when they put in this wall, and they decided to turn this into a bathroom, they decided that a window that size in a bathroom wasn't quite as proper as they might have liked. So we are opening this back up, so that
it will be symmetrical, it will be beautiful.
When we were talking about turning this still into the bedroom, into pets, which is what it was, or about half at least, we were going to open this window up, so there would have been this symmetry with the 3 windows, but now again, back to its original proportions.
So in answer to the person who said in the comment section, Are you seriously going to keep that massive brown ceiling? Yes, I do understand your question, but we are seriously going to keep the massive brown ceiling. And we have a design challenge ahead of us to make it marry as well as we possibly can with the later 18th century panelling. We've already discussed this quite a lot with Amory, and we're not going to take the cornice up to and touching the ceiling. We will have the panelling and the cornice stopping below the ceiling. The ceiling would originally have had a painted frieze only about this depth along the whole wall underneath it. We'll probably put that painted frieze back if the restorers can discover enough of it to do so accurately, and then we'll stop the cornicing below that. So we'll make it very obvious that the panelling is a later addition. We're not trying to pretend it was a 17th century panelling at all. A lot of you have also asked what colour the panelling will be, whether it will stay this colour or change. It won't stay this colour because I think this with the brown, it doesn't quite work. And we want to find a way of drawing the ceiling down into the room, but without darkening the room. That really is going to be the darkest spot. So we were thinking of taking the lightest grey blue from the vases of flowers that you see around the ceiling and having a very French grey blue panelling with the gold, because gold against blue looks extraordinarily good. It's also a colour that we can find in the ceiling that is also very historically correct for 18th century panelling like this. So the colours on the ceiling are absolutely perfect for the 17th century. When you're surprised that there's a very big brown ceiling, they were almost always painted brown or red as the background colour. And that is probably because these ceilings have been painted in this way since the medieval times. And of course, these rooms were entirely lit by candles. And the grander the room, the more candles there would have been lighting it. So the ceilings were probably painted this way to hide the soot stains. In the same way as if you go to Pompeii, you see that the dining rooms, the rooms that the Romans used in the evening and had the most oil lamps in, they were usually painted very dark colours, even black, to hide the soot stains from the oil lamps. So the ceiling will retain its historic 17th century colours, and the panelling will get very historically accurate 18th century colours, and hopefully that will tie the two together. Now, that's not a definite decision, but that's just to give you an idea of where we're going at the moment with the thought process for the room.
Actually, I think everyone's very much on the same page, because when we opened this up, the first thing we thought, great, there's a loo next door, we can pin off that and have the loo here. But it never felt quite right the more we were thinking about it. I mean, you don't want to walk outside back into a room full of people.
You need excellent soundproofing there.
It's just not very elegant, I suppose. And a lot of you felt the same. So we've decided that this instead is going to be a bar.
A wet bar, which is great.
Yes, exactly. So you can walk
Nice.
in here, you can still use the door, there'll be a hidden door here. You can walk in, there'll be a wet bar there. It also means that, for example, when Nettie receives the guests, they can go up to the Grand Salon. She goes, would you like a cup of tea, or would you like something else? You can prepare it here. We have to go all the way to the kitchen. You know, it's just very, very easy. And then the other side, where the electrical cupboard is now, that will be the loo. So basically, you have to walk into the corridor to get to the loo, which sort of like suspends your disbelief as though someone has been doing, rather than you see them appear from behind.
Another thing that many of you have been asking about in the comments is where we found traces of a painted ceiling like this in the attic. Many of you are saying, is that the painted ceiling that you found in the attic years ago? It's not this ceiling, it's next door, which means that it's over the bedroom next door, and gives us the very clear idea that in future we have another very big discovery that we know is there.
Because we've only seen the little side beams.
Little tiny bits upstairs.
Yeah.
And we think possibly, if we are lucky, there would be even one more room on this floor with a painted ceiling as well. We think the Chambre Bonne Maman might have a painted ceiling. There were no painted ceilings downstairs. Many of you have asked about that for the reason we said earlier. These were the rooms that the family were living in and decorating for themselves. They wouldn't have put this sort of expense in the service areas downstairs.
Even in the 18th century, you wouldn't have put this kind of paneling into your laundry room. Or even nowadays, you're not going to put like Carrera. Maybe you would. I don't know you. But I don't think it's likely for the family. Everyone's got a certain budget, and you want to blow that on the rooms that you're going to show off in. And you're not going to receive your guests, or at least not in the 18th century or in the 17th century, in your laundry room or in your dining hall for your servants. And someone was talking about a parterre. We need like a French formal garden. We have planned one. We talked with Dave ages ago, and it's going to go here, which means that it's even better that the Grand Salon will be back on the first floor, on this floor, because those gardens were designed to be looked down on. So you could see all the swirls and all the shapes. And that means that from here, you get a much better view.
It will be spectacular.
It will be beautiful. And also, we talked about putting in those parterres, in those hedges, tulips. So tie in the ceiling that we see here with the tulips. To sort of have that same idea. And also, you love tulipières, like the beautiful tulip vases. So we're going to try and get some beautiful ones for in here that will have tulips year round.
Oh, we're going with the tulips. We've got a theme. We are running with it.
You can see the beautiful, beautiful view that you get from this room.
So this side will be the lake, the more informal
Yes.
countryside, the lawn, and the other side will be the formal French garden.
Now, you can feel it slightly off-center with the building, and that's because these shrubs are, you put in.
In line with the stairs.
Exactly, but the stairs are not in line with anything else. They're not in line with anything else. So what we're going to do is we're moving the stairs, because the stairs
Yes, they'll be about
broken.
here.
Exactly.
And then that line of topiary, which will be more impressive than it is now, it will be moved across so that it centres the view there in between
It also
those
means
woods.
it's very, very easy to walk from the dining room.
Straight up, because if you remember, the dining room is directly below us,
Yep.
and those are doors, not windows. So from the dining room, people will be able to walk straight out, down the stairs, and onto the lawn.
It'll be beautiful.
I can't quite believe this is happening. It's just a dream come true.
But it's also it's listening to what the building wants.
These changes have been made over time, and sort of the soul of the building has been lost in time, you know? So it's good to realize, no, this is what it needs, and this is what makes the flow of the house much better.
it
It sounds
feels
weird to
right.
go up the stairs, but it works so much better, and it's so much less dark here, you know, than it was before, so it works.
So, as in the kitchen, this is not a room where I can just go, I want a yellow room with a new gas stove and just put in whatever I want. Not at all. I have to listen to Lalande, and I have to find a balance between what works best for the building and what I love. And it's actually quite fun working with those restrictions, because it does make you more creative and it does make you come up with some pretty lovely interiors.